It's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to attract Dr. Mander year after year. And I think your cheerful presence will make his visits to Heidelberg even more attractive. And we do hope that he is, I will not do a big biographical presentation of him. Apart from letting you know that he was a member of the Indian Administrative Service, which is the only civil service that India has. And after the riots that took place in Godhra in 2002, he promptly resigned from his position to become an activist. Few people have done that. But most importantly, what distinguishes him and his work today is the fact that he is fighting for the rights of India's minorities at a time when ethno-nationalism has raised its ugly head. This is politically the most sensitive issue. This is also an issue that attracts a lot of wrath from the government of today. And he is one of those people who will not bend despite whatever it is that the government does to him. He has won many awards. He was tipped to win the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize, being nominated by the Peace Research Institute in Oslo. But we know how the Nobel Peace Prize will be there. So I think I'm very happy that he didn't get it. My opinion of him would have changed if he had got the award. But more importantly, he has been awarded with the prestigious Bosch Fellowship, which brings him to Germany year after year. Again, it's not a fellowship for which you make an application. It's a very distinguished award. He was the first recipient of the Human Rights Award delivered by the Friedrich Albert University in Erlangen-Nuremberg. The second distinguished awardee is now in place. So he has won many awards, despite winning all of these awards and probably being able to spend more time in other parts of the world. He continues to struggle for the rights of all the citizens of India, which include, of course, the majority community as well. And from that perspective, today's lecture becomes very, very important because the RSS, or the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, is actually the social arm of the right-wing Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party. It is not yet a registered organization, but it is already the largest civil society organization in the world. And it has this Janus space where it continuously argues that it is not a political organization, that the BJP is the political organization and not the RSS. But today we find that India is in a situation where the Prime Minister of the country was an active participant of the RSS movement. And there are many, many people who are in the cabinet who also participated actively in the RSS. So what does all of this mean for us is something that Dr. Mander will tell us in light of the events that have happened, and the organization is 100 years old today. But before giving the floor to Dr. Mander, I want to make a couple of points that are of an organizational nature. This lecture is a part of my research colloquium. The next lecture will be by a former head of the Department of Political Science at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Professor Narendra Kumar. We have a very distinguished series of lecturers who will participate in the research colloquium. And for students who will participate in the research colloquium, I want to let you know that the research colloquium is open to everybody, even those who are not taking it for credit. And this has been ongoing since I joined the university 9 years ago. The second last point I want to make is that there is a class that Dr. Mander will teach, which is a continuation of the class and the film festival that has taken place over the last 2 years, which I myself have experienced because I have seen many of these films that were screened. And the first film that will be screened as a part of the class after the reception of this talk is a classic by Satyajit Ray called Mahanagar, which will be screened at 5 o'clock. So there'll be a reception from 4 to 5, and then there will be the screening of Mahanagar. And tomorrow there will be Shyam Benegal's classic movie Nishant that will be screened. The last year when this film festival was held, it was in a way dedicated to Shyam Benegal, one of India's greatest film directors. In fact, Dr. Mander did an interview of Mr. Shyam Benegal, which was screened. And this was kind of historic because a couple of months later he passed away. So we remember Shyam Benegal during the film festival last year. And we remembered him in the way that he should have been remembered. I will not list the films that will be screened because they are on the notice board. And so I encourage you to spread the message regarding the class that Dr. Mander is teaching, which is India through cinema. He has taught South Asia through cinema. There will also be a film festival in Karlstad, Kino, which is also advertised, and some of our students are participating there. And Dr. Mander will be in many of the panel discussions after the film festival. So then I think I have done most of my stock taking in terms of both introducing the class, the lecture, and I do hope that you will all have a great semester ahead. The floor is yours, sir.
Friends, thank you, Rahul. Thank you all of you for gathering this afternoon. I know this is the first day of the semester. Some of you might be students here on your first day in Heidelberg, and it's so warm welcome to you. What we're going to discuss today is somber, but I think critical. Not just to understand the possible future, the crossroads in a sense that India stands, but I think it, in a broader sense, and I'd like to argue, this is the crossroads that almost all of humankind stands when we're making choices today. History sometimes plays tricks. And one of the tricks, one of the paradoxes is that the RSS celebrates 100 years of its existence on the day of the festival of Vijayadashmi, which falls this year on October 2nd, which is also the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And I think it's in a strange way history reminding us about two very different paths that my own people in my own country, but I think all of humankind needs to take. Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated a few months after India won the freedom. And whether the assassin was formally a member of the RSS remains debatable, because it's not a formal organization with a formal kind of membership. But that he was deeply influenced by the ideology of the RSS is without doubt. And therefore the ideal. Just to understand the RSS better, I have just completed a series of 12 long conversations. 2 or 3 of them have been broadcast with my South Asian. To understand the RSS, and some of what I speak today is really drawn from insights from these conversations. But the first conversation in this series was with Rajmohan Gandhi. Rajmohan Gandhi is Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, 90 years old. In fact, a few days earlier, before I spoke to him, celebrated his 90th birthday. He was alive and around when Gandhi was assassinated in the young boy. And the question I asked him, why did the RSS assassinate? Why is it so hostile to Gandhi? Because in my readings of the literature of the RSS, I found that if their number one enemy is India's Muslims, a close second is Pakistan. And I try to understand from Rajmohan Gandhi, what is it that has resulted in such hostility to Gandhi? And in some of the greatest insights in the world are always those that can be distilled to great simplicity. And Gandhi used to himself specialize in this kind of distillation. But Rajmohan Gandhi said there are 2 reasons why the RSS hates Gandhi. The first of them is that he said India belongs equally to all people. People of every faith, every caste, every race. And particularly India's Muslims. And the second, he said, was that he said, Ishwar and Allah are the same. Ram and Rahim are the same. The God in every religion is one. And these are the 2 reasons why the RSS has remained so hostile to Mahatma Gandhi. And I think that my own country, and I'll talk a little bit about it, why we stand at this very critical crossroads, choosing between these 2 paths, the very different paths. One is a path which, and it was a very courageous path. It's a path of what I call radical love that Mahatma Gandhi chose. Radical love is love that is based on profound courage and conviction. And I want you to go back for a few young people. In India in 1947, the British left India divided as they did many parts of the world, and the consequences of it felt for generations. So India and Pakistan were partitioned. 1 million people slaughtered each other, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, in a frenzy of unending hate. And rivers of blood were flowing. Huge, about 15 million people estimated lost their countries and their homes. It was the largest displacement in human history that occurred at that time. Train roads filled with corpses were coming in this direction and going back in that direction. My own family was among those who were uprooted amidst unbelievably brutal violence in what is now Pakistan, and they also had to come to India. So at that time, it was, and the refugees filling up, Delhi, there used to be 33% Muslim population. And in 1947, by 48, 49, Muslims were 5% of the population. And just a reminder of what kind of upheaval and improvement happened at that time. And the Hindu right, the RSS, and many who were sympathetic to it said that they, inverted commas, have their Pakistan, and we should have a Hindu India. And in other words, we should become a mirror image of Pakistan. And we chose differently. And we chose differently because of the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, but also that the majority of Indians of every faith believed in that idea, where it would not matter which God you worship or if you worship no God. It would not matter what language you spoke, what was the color of your skin, your caste, your gender, your wealth. You would be an equal citizen, an equal human being, an equal citizen, with equal belonging without any conditionalities. That was what we call the idea of India. That was the idea for which Mahatma Gandhi led our freedom struggle, and that is the India that we chose. That is the India for which Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. And before I proceed, I just want to say how profound that moment of choice was. When India's the flag of independent India was first hoisted by India's first Prime Minister, 15th August 47, Gandhi was not in Delhi celebrating. He was in Calcutta because there was an unending slaughter of between Hindus and Muslims, and there seemed no chance of it ending. And he went that persuade, and then finally went on this fast, and it was like a miracle. It took 4 or 5 days, and violence came completely to an end. And it was just the moral force. And to illustrate this, many stories of Gandhi at that time, they say while he was fasting, a Hindu man, very, very enraged, came to Gandhi and said, "What you're doing is very wrong. Don't you understand my pain and my anger? I had a little boy this small, and Muslim mobs killed him. And you're saying stop the slaughter?" And Gandhi replied, "I understand your pain. I share it. But I will tell you a way. I'll tell you a way. Find a little boy this small, a Muslim boy, whose parents were slaughtered by Hindu mobs. Adopt the child as your own son. Raise him like you would have raised your son, but in his faith. And maybe you'll find some way of healing." Just hearing these stories, can you think of a leader in these times giving this advice to his people? And that is why this choice was so significant. In fact, two weeks before his assassination, he went on his last, and many people say, I believe, his greatest fast. But think of this time when, Delhi was full of very enraged refugees who had lost their country and lost their loved ones. And one of the things they did was that they said now there can be no mosques and dargahs in India. And what they did was that in the major mosque in Connaught Place in Delhi, they put idols. In Dargah and Mehuli, they put Hindu idols. And Gandhi's in the last past, one of his principal demands was that we must restore these places of worship with complete respect to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And he observed that no true place of worship, no true place of worship can be based on disrespect, desecration, and pain to people for another religion. And he was advised at that time that there's so much anger, this is not the time, and do it. And he, of course, insisted on going ahead. And the first day there were 10,000 people on the streets of Delhi in his support. By the fifth day there were 100,000 people. And the RSS and the Hindu Mahasabha were among those who had to sign an agreement to restore the places of worship to Muslims. Why should the world be interested in the RSS and its history? And I'm happy to places here, the people from South Asia, large majority who are not from South Asia. And I think that is fitting. Because I believe that the same crossroads that lie today before India, same crossroads actually that where India stood in 1947, the same crossroads seem to stand, that seem to lie before people in country after country around the world. Because we're seeing more and more people around the world are choosing leaders. They're not coming, at the back of machine guns, and they're being chosen by people who are teaching us, encouraging us to hate. People, leaders who, whose hate is also centered around some defined, very vulnerable minority. So in America, it's like all America's problems are because of some desperate refugees are coming in from Mexico. In the UK, there was this, big meeting between the president of France and the Prime Minister of the UK. And what was their great sort of accomplishment? We have reached an agreement how to keep out the people who come in small boats. So is it really the Rohingya desperate to survive, who's braved great dangers to reach your shores? Is he or she or the little child there, are they your greatest threat? But we have been persuaded that so we're choosing leaders who are encouraging us to hate and are stigmatizing vulnerable minorities in this way. We're also seeing what I would describe as a profound absence of public compassion in the leaders that we're choosing. And the kind of moral discourse that I spoke about, that Gandhi gave, is even beyond our imagination today. It's possible for Donald Trump to actually say, okay, Palestine, let's build a Riviera and let the Palestinians, let them go somewhere else. I mean, the fact that the world's most powerful leader can so casually talk about people who have suffered incredible levels of violence in this really casual way is again a marker of our times. So we're having, and country after country, I was just reading an email from a dear friend in the Netherlands, and he's returning after many years serving in other parts of the world. He was saying, I can't even recognize my country. He said there's so much bigotry, so much hate. And then there's the other part. The part which says it does not matter which God you worship. It does not matter what the color of your skin is. It does not matter what language you speak. It does not matter who you love, since sexuality is such a big question today. You are an equal human being, equal citizen. That's the choice. And I see, therefore, this moment of choice before the Indian people is also an almost identical moment of choice before people in all of humankind. Which is why it is important to pay attention to the RSS and its history and so it will proceed. The RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, literally means the National Volunteer Corps. India's far-right volunteer paramilitary organization today has 4 million members. All women are allowed to be members. It has 83,000 branches. If you travel to India, in almost every city, in public parks, every morning you see them gather. Earlier they used to wear khaki shorts, quite recently, just aesthetically. I'm glad at least they've shifted to long travel. They would gather and do military drills every morning. In these 83,000 branches that they have across the country, it's definitely the world's largest far-right organization by membership. Many estimated to be the world's largest civil society formation. It is the ideological mentor of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. It is the leader and progenitor of a large number of organizations within India and in the diaspora, which is called Sangh Parivar, the family of the RSS. It's a very powerful force, the diaspora, in many parts of the world. And second generation, third generation Hindu Indians are being encouraged by their parents to learn their roots, their alleged roots, via the teachings of the RSS and its organizations in temples. And the teachings of the RSS, the Hinduism that they practice, is diametrically opposed to what the Hindu faith actually stands for. But they are being raised in this very hateful interpretation of religious faith. And incidentally, I think it's very important to make it clear Islam and Islamism are very different. The Jewish faith and hardline version of Zionism are very different. They're not the same, they're very different. Trump claims to stand for Christian values. I'm familiar with Christian values, and I think he represents everything which is antithetical to Christian values. Likewise, Hinduism and Hindutva are very different ideologies. And in some ways, I would argue that the danger, this cadre of 4 million people, very devoted cadres across the country in India, make what is happening in India in some ways even more perilous, dangerous for democracy. Imagine if the Ku Klux Klan was a legal overground organization which gathered for parades in every public park in the cities of the United States every morning. And they were the overt support base of Donald Trump. What would not the danger that his politics represent be multiplied many times over? And it is that danger that is unfolding so clearly, so violently in India, but the world is choosing to look away. A little bit about the founding. As I said, it's 100 years, 1925, and Gandhi had come a decade earlier to lead India's freedom struggle. And for Gandhi, the freedom struggle was never just a battle against British imperialism, it was also equally a battle for what kind of India we would build after the British left and who would belong to and who would not belong to. Within that, the founder of the RSS is somebody called Hedgewar. He believed that a handful of British colonists were able to rule over India because Hindus were disunited, they lacked valor, they lacked civic character. And there were many senior leaders who reflected this idea. Madan Mohan Malviya, who was currently, at the same time, he was a Congress leader, but he was also a leader of the Hindu Mahasabha. He said in 1923, friendship could only exist between equals. It is if the Hindus make themselves strong and the rowdy sections among the Mohammedans are convinced that they could not safely rob and dishonor Hindus, unity would be established on a stable basis. So he wanted to educate all Hindu boys and girls, and he wanted them to establish akharas or gymnasiums and establish a volunteer corps. Savarkar again spoke about Hindus and Muslims. In fact, he first spoke about two nations and not Jinnah. He said Hindus and Hindus and Muslims constitute two separate nations. And in 1925, Hedgewar started this the RSS. He recruited energetic Hindu youth with radical fervor, and the uniform he chose was quite interesting. It was initially khaki shirts, khaki shorts, a black cap, and a baton, almost emulating the uniform of the Imperial British Police, and began to teach them paramilitary techniques with the lathi or the bamboo staff, swords, javelins, and daggers. The flag they chose was the flag of the Hindu king Shivaji, which was a saffron flag, the Bhagwaj and Dwaj, as its emblem. And very early, the hostility to Muslims began to manifest itself. Way back in 1920, in India, we are seeing a series of manufactured, what are called riots. And the pattern is very similar, that you use a Hindu festival to have a procession which then gathers in front of a mosque and starts playing loud music and making provocative slogans and so on. And at some point, the skirmish breaks out and then hell breaks loose. But I was curious to find way back in 1927, this is what they did in Nagpur, which was exactly to use the Ganesh festival to gather outside a mosque, and a huge riot ensued and went on for 3 days, and led to a large exodus of Muslims at that time. What is the ideology of the RSS? And somebody who's an important political commentator, also a dear friend, Akar Patel, he said something quite interesting. He said, you cannot call what the RSS stands for as an ideology, because an ideology is a comprehensive kind of worldview. You can be an RSS member and believe in Swadeshi, which means the opposite of globalization, or you can believe in big corporate globalization. They're both compatible, for instance. He said that there is only one thing that is non-negotiable for the RSS, and that is hatred for Muslims and Christians. And it is this extreme supremacist militant form of political Hinduism that characterizes Hindutva. They believe that Muslims and Christians can never be part of the Hindu nation. And one of the early, most influential Urvakas explains why it's the case. He says that for Hindus and for Muslims and Christians, their fatherland or motherland is in India, but their sacred land is in Vatican and Jerusalem and Mohammed. And therefore they can never belong. And it is only Hindus or other Indian faiths like Sikhism and Hinduism and Jainism, where the sacred land is located within the geography of India. So he spoke about he said that Muslims, and very frankly he spoke about the fact that his belief that Muslims have just two options. Either they fully adopt Hindu faith, Hindu culture, Hindu beliefs, or they leave. And if they stay, then they should be denied all rights and live only as second class. That's the sort of framework within which this ideology, which is centered on a visceral hatred of Muslims and to a lesser degree Christians and Hindu supremacism. And another thing that is important to note is the RSS is very profound and acknowledged celebration of Hitler and Nazi Germany. And you must remember that these writings happened while the Holocaust was unfolding, where they spoke about Hitler as being this great nationalist leader, and they go so far as saying, look at how well he has solved the Jewish problem, and we need to solve the Muslim problem in the same way. There is also very close interactions with Mussolini's fascism. And these were profound influences on the RSS ideology. Another thing that is important to understand is that the RSS stood completely apart from the freedom struggle. They did not participate in the freedom struggle. They made it very clear that they would not participate. And today, because they're trying to adopt this mantle of not just nationalism, but being the only patriots, it's a very strange kind of contortion they have to do because they don't have heroes of their own. So they try to take and reinvent heroes in very strange kind of ways. Bhagat Singh, for instance, was a communist, and now he's portrayed as this hero. Ambedkar said, I think, he called for the annihilation of the Hindu faith, and now he is sought to be brought in. Vivekananda spoke repeatedly about one of his famous quotes of they said, I'm proud to belong to a country which welcomes the persecuted of every religion and every nation. And now you're trying to make him an icon because you didn't have icons of your own. It stood aloof from the freedom struggle for reasons that were both tactical, because they kept convincing the British that we're not fighting you. And so the British never took action against the RSS. But there were also ideological reasons, and the ideological reasons surfaces very clearly now in Modi's India, where they keep repeating that India didn't suffer in 200 years of we normally talk about 200 years of slavery, which is the period of British colonialism. They say we suffer from 1,000 years of slavery, which means, according to them, that it was our long period of when we had Muslim rulers in India, that was a period of slavery, according to them, into their version of history. So they said that the real battle is against India's Muslims, isn't against India and British colonialists. And so they stood apart from the freedom struggle. And after freedom, uh, all the efforts that Mahatma Gandhi made, in fact, his last months were, I think, his most painful, but also the most beautiful of his life, of how he went to seek peace. I was reading Rajiv Gandhi's biography once again of Gandhiji, and it is really striking because he said, "My India and my Pakistan." He didn't talk Pakistan as the other. He said, "They're both mine," you know, and it really sounds like another time, another way, and it was when Muslims felt that they had no option except to leave this country, he went, all over to persuade them to stay. There is a community called the Mewatis who are close to their particular sect of the Muslim community. And some of the worst incidents of lynching have happened targeting the Mewatis. And so, in my work in what we call the Caravan Mohammed, was a caravan club, where we try to learn from Gandhi's example and try to reach out to every victim of hate violence, go to them, try to share their pain. The Mewatis told me, you cannot do this without coming to us and spending a night in a village called Kasera. And I said, why? They said, on December 19th, on 1947, Gandhiji came to us. There had been a series of slaughters of the Mewati people by the then kings of Bharatpur and Alwar. And I think 50,000 Mewatis had been slaughtered. And they felt they had no option except to go to Pakistan. And Gandhi came on December 19th and appealed to them and said, this is your country. And on that day, they chose to stay on in India. And we celebrated like a great festival. They have folk songs. They recount that moment. So it was in this period that the partition riots, the RSS had a huge role to play in the violence of partition when the village people slaughtered each other. After the freedom struggle, also they opposed India's constitution, which talked about equal rights for people of all faiths. They opposed the national flag, because the national flag, India's national flag, has three colors: saffron, white, and green, equal size in all of these. In a sense, symbolizing equal belonging of people of every faith. In fact, for 52 years, they refused to even wear the national flag on the RSS headquarters. They wanted the constitution to be replaced by what is called Manusmriti. Manusmriti is an ancient Hindu text which actually is characterized by affirming the righteousness of the inequality of caste and the discrimination and the exclusions that profound exclusions that are faced by Dalits. And they retain a paramilitary character. I recall even in 1947 during the riots, Nehru wrote to all the chief ministers. We have a great deal of evidence to show that the RSS is an organization which is in the nature of a private army and which is definitely proceeding on the strictest Nazi lines, even following the techniques of the organization. And the important thing is that if you live in India, you wake up in the morning and go to the work in the park, and you see these young or older men, recently in khaki shorts, wielding sticks and daggers. Who are they wielding it against? They have constructed this enemy within, and it is that war that is continuously being, and people who were in the RSS and have left have been very sort of moving testimonies of what happens, what are they continuously taught in the RSS is primarily hatred against the Muslim community. I wanted to say that the most significant position among their volunteers is what is called the Pracharak. The Pracharak is active full-time missionaries of the RSS who spread the doctrine of the RSS. The system of the Pracharak or RSS missionaries is called the lifeblood of the organization. And many men have devoted themselves. One of the things they have to accept is a life of celibacy, poverty, service to the organization, and so on. We've had two BJP prime ministers. One of them is Vajpayee, and one of them is Narendra Modi. Both of them have been pracharaks for long periods of their life. They've grown up in this. They've been socialized in the ideology of the RSS. There was a recent, very important book on what is called the Gita Press. The Gita Press was the principal mode of communication for the ideology of the RSS. And it reached virtually every Hindu home. And it became part of life because they would also tell you, what is this religious significance of this day, what kind of fast they're supposed to keep, etc. But then it was filled with this kind of hatred. And the importance of this kind of communication is underlined in this description of the RSS. It's also interesting when I was reading that they said that the bitter rupture with Gandhiji did not first happen on the question of Muslims. It happened when we led a movement for the entry of Dalits into Hindu temples. It was the great temple entry. Gandhi declared that he will never enter a temple if Dalits are not permitted to enter and worship there. And it was that led to this really bitter break of the Gita Press. Incidentally, India's sort of highest award in tribute to Gandhiji, they gave an International Gandhi Award. And last year they chose the Gita Press for that award. And I just said, okay, if you want to, but don't give the Gandhi Award to Gita Press. But it's in this complicated way that they are rewriting our past. There was a much more recent book called Age Pop, which talks about how, by Kunal Purohit, which talks about how the ideology of the RSS is being communicated today. And the interesting thing is that it is using pop music in a major kind of way. So you have these really catchy music with a great beat, and you want to dance, but it's full of hatred and abuse for Muslims. And it's become so routine. You get it on your phones, you dance to this music in parties and weddings and so on and so forth. So he traces in this book this whole new phenomenon, which is H-pop or Hindutva pop, and how they have adapted to new forms of communication. This telephone and WhatsApp. I mean, earlier we used to have, there were moments when hate was sort of created. Here you get your daily dose 10 times a day. Every time you open your WhatsApp, you get a new hateful communication. So it's a continuous process of communication. But the power of communication is something that we also have to learn. Quickly, let me talk about, when Gandhiji was assassinated, the RSS was for a period banned. It was really stigmatized. It went into the shadows of our public life. How did it really emerge? And that's a story of complicity of virtually every other force. So it was Jayaprakash Narayan who was a leading, saw himself as one of the greatest inheritors of Mahatma Gandhi. And I know that Pradeep is sitting there and he's doing his research on precisely this, and we've spoken about it. The irony is that at some point he felt that he had to fight the authoritarianism and corruption of Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister. And he felt his strongest ally would be the RSS. So it was he who drew the RSS out of the shadows. And this was the moment they were waiting for, and they never looked back. And they joined this fight led by Jayaprakash Narayan. The emergency happened. In fact, interestingly, history tells us that they wrote many letters of telling Indira Gandhi that don't be on your side, and don't, in a sense. But it was that period that they needed to emerge and become part of the mainstream. And then in the 1980s, they launched this big movement against on the Babri Masjid, and the Babri Masjid demolition happened. Many of us regard it to be perhaps the most tragic day in India's after Mahatma Gandhi's, in India's history after Gandhi's assassination. Because it wasn't just simply the demolition of a medieval mosque. It was, in fact, a mob destruction of that idea of equal respect and equal belonging. It was the destruction of both the civilizational idea of India, but also the constitutional idea of India. And the BJP never looked back. India has seen skirmishes of what we call communal riots, which is a misnomer, because riots are when two communities fight each other. Most of these are pogroms where it is the state on the side of the majority community against the minority community. I was a civil servant. I headed 6 districts. I saw very closely how the RSS works, how it systematically creates hatred through rumors, through the logistics of planning. And scholars like Paul Grass, etc., have written about this. Many judicial commissions talk about their role in communal riots as well. A little bit about the Sangh and women. It's interesting that the RSS never allowed women to join. It was an all-male reserve. And somewhere in the mid-30s, there was a concession, so they created a separate organization for women. But it's interesting that they can never be in leadership roles, of course. And their role is much more to produce militant men and nurture militant men, etc. But in a paradoxical way, it has also allowed women to step out. And so you have, I've been following hate speech, and it's terrifying to see now how many of the worst hate speech perpetrators are women. Sadhvis, and so on. During the Babinasi demolition, there was a woman called Sadhvi Tambara who made the worst candidate speeches. I used to be a district head at that time, and my driver, the driver of my car, was a Muslim. I used to sit in front with him, and we passed through every marketplace and glaring this abuse of Muslims by the Sadhvi. And I remember I used to, sort of in shame, lower my eyes with my Muslim driver sitting next to me. Recently, the government decided to give her the Padma Bhushan, which is the third highest civilian award, to Sadhvi Ritangar. So this complex, in a strange way, there was some agency that women gained with their participation in the politics of the RSS, but it was an agency to advance hate. So that is something I wanted to say. India's indigenous people, the Adivasis, have become one of the most robust supporters of the BJP. And that is a story in itself. Because I've served in these areas, and the Adivasis of Central India are hugely oppressed. And they see the RSS as representing the money lender, the forest contractor, the landlord, and now the big corporations. Yet they vote for the RSS and BJP. And I think, again, the power of what they have done is, and the Dalit, every third Dalit, the recently research showed that every third Dalit in the country voted BJP in 2019 and 2024. And it seems paradoxical that in a profoundly hierarchical society where this hierarchy and inequality is sanctioned by the state, where is, why are they supporting? And I think, again, looking at other parts of the world, why did black men and Latino men vote for Trump? There's something very complex that is being mediated and negotiated. And as far as the Dalit is concerned, I find that what they can never promise them equality. What they're promising them is belonging. We never, traditionally, the Adivasi and the Dalit was seen as sort of, people you never regard as your own. What they've given them is, we are all Hindus, and the real enemy is the Muslims. So let's all join hands. And sadly, even the Christians are being brought into this joint. You create such a hatred other, and everybody joins hands. And the success of this project is quite remarkable. With the Adivasi, they've also used Hindu reform movements and organizations to enter the RSS, various others, which these organizations are not hateful to Muslims, but they in a sense trade the soil for their bounds. And it's 100 years they worked with extraordinary dedication and adaptability, in how their women, and I find women, Dalits and Adivasis being principal supporters of the RSS, which is an ideological system which will never give you equality. An extraordinary political and social accomplishment, which we need to understand more closely. The RSS in Northeast India, again, has played a very significant role. What role did they play in Manipur, for instance? Manipur, we have Babri who will probably speak to us sometime. It was a clash between two ethnicities, the Maiti and the Kukido communities. As it happened, the cookies were largely Christian and the Maithis were largely Hindu, but it was not a Hindu-Christian pact. This time it became years and years of quiet work has sort of has led to this development. The Hindutva version of history, they completely rewriting our history and using films, using textbooks. According to this revisionist history, those 1,000 years in which we had Muslim rulers were not times of where every Muslim ruler was almost by definition a hateful bigot who was oppressing Hindu women, who was forcing conversions, who was breaking Hindu temples. None of it is borne out by history. In fact, when the British came to colonize India, India represented about 1/4 of the world's GDP under Muslim ruler. So it could not have been, this very oppressive society, but they want to rebuild. Akbar is this emperor among the Mughals who we all revere because he tried really hard to bring different religious tolerance, bring different faiths together. He has now been also reinvented as a hateful bigot and so on. Every mosque is seen to be, at some stage, some temple was broken down. So there's this, and the other part of the revisionist history is to actually say we were the ones who really fought for freedom. Gandhi and all were all people who were weak and betrayed freedom. At the site of the Babri Masjid, where it was demolished in 1992, they got a Supreme Court order and they built this grand temple to Lord Ram. Incidentally, there's a recording of Gandhi. He said, a true place of worship can never be based on the desecration and disrespect to another faith. I'm quite convinced that Gandhi never regarded this to be a temple of God. But when the consecration happened, the Union Cabinet passed a resolution 2 days later. Because Mr. Modi himself presided over this program, and the country's elite were all invited. And he said, the cabinet said, in 1947, only the body of India was free. The soul of India was free on 22nd January 2024 when the Ram Temple was consecrated. So what is this alternative imagination? It means that our true oppression was by India's Muslims. Gandhiji, instead of calling them out and fighting them, gave his life for them, and so on and so forth. But at last we have this, and it called himself very masculine, 56-inch chest is something that is good. His 56-inch chest leader has finally come, who's taken on the reality. And the building of this temple and its consecration on the site where a medieval mosque stood is India's, when India's soul became free. And when they said this, I began to think, when did my country's soul become free? And my country's soul became free when we chose to be a country of equality and kindness and equal belonging, even when the slaughter of partition happened. That is when my country's soul became free. Couple of more lines about where we are today. In this series of conversations that I've had, these 12 conversations about the RSS, I spoke to T.M. Krishna. T.M. Krishna is this, he's a great Carnatic singer, Carnatic music singer. But he's also, I think, one of our finest public intellectuals and again, a very dear friend. And I asked him, Tamil Nadu is actually the only part of India, if you leave out Kashmir, where the Muslim is not a hate figure, where the RSS has not succeeded in making the Muslim the central hate figure. And I asked him why. And we had this very fascinating conversation where he said that in Tamil Nadu, the movement for caste equality, the movement against irrationalism, the self-respect movement led by Periyar, was in a sense the antidote to the hate politics. So the battle for equality, according to him, is the best antidote to the politics of hate. In simple words. Hindutva and the RSS under Modi have reached heights. It's a juggernaut that seems unstoppable. See, the battle against India's Muslims, they might admire Hitler, but you cannot have a slaughter of 200 million. And that's the Muslim population in India. You might want to throw them on into the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, but obviously you cannot. So what is the genocidal project that is taking shape? What does it look like? Hannah Arendt spoke about citizenship as being the right to have rights. The right to have rights. Just think about it. And I think what is unfolding in India, is that Muslims have been pushed into a space where they no longer have the right to have rights. They're already there. So I can stand on a public platform and call for the genocide of India's Muslims, for mass rape, for killings, and no action will be taken against me. It's quite likely that I'll be picked up and months later, which actually happened in a particular case. The 2020, we had this criminal violence in Delhi, and there were some leaders like Kapil Mishra who led with hate speech. I was in the Supreme Court the next day saying, at least take action against him. It's a long story. It didn't happen. The judge who was sympathetic got transferred out that very night. 5 years have passed. They still haven't registered his complaint against him, but he's now been made not just a minister, but the law and justice minister of Delhi, the same person who made the speech. So, what message are you giving? Public prayer has become really difficult. I was reading this woman in a hospital. Her loved one was very seriously ill, so she sat in the corridor outside and performed namaz. And she was, crowds gathered and said, and repeatedly they've been charged with creating hatred against religion by prayer. So, in fact, I wrote this piece of when prayer has become a crime. Then in other examples, the use of the bulldozer is another. Because, you see, there's no law in the country so far that you commit a crime and you goes home. But also to establish that you have committed the crime, there's a whole process. I mean, the police has to file a complaint, there's to be investigation, there's to be a charge sheet, there's evidence in the law court, Higher Court of Appeal, Supreme Court of Appeal. Then it's established that you committed the crime. Here, what is happening, and it's happening across the country, that the police decides and state decides that you committed a crime, and a day later they come home with bulldoze home. And there are many examples of it, but I'll just give you one. There was a India-Pakistan match going on, and somebody from one of the RSS organizations in Ujjain was passing by and he said he heard the minor boy teenage boy in that home cheering Pakistan in the match. The police comes, they detain the boy, they arrest his parents, and they bulldoze his home. You know, the right, you don't have the right to have rights. Um, and most dramatically, it is in this whole process of lynching that has become like an epidemic. And that, responding to it has become central to my work in the last years, where basically what happens is that a crowd gathers around, some claim that he was slaughtering a cow, or this idea of love jihad is a particularly strange myth that, what is love jihad? It is the claim that good-looking Muslim boys are picked up in madrasas and trained how to sexually attract Hindu girls. And Hindu girls obviously have nothing in their heads, so they get attractive, and it's really a conspiracy to produce Muslim babies out of it. I mean, it's such a misogynist and horrible kind of myth, but people are really into it across the country. So it's love jihad, love slaughter. But we're trying to create a tracker, and we found actually the biggest reason for lynching has turned out to be just ostensible Muslim identity. No other reason. And so what happens is that they gather, they slowly beat the person with sticks, with stones, over some hours, and they videotape it. And then and that person slowly loses life. And I found repeatedly that one of the last things you do before this happens is to ask for water. And the triumph is that you deny them even the water. And then that person dies. And you're videotaping this. It's happened over and over again. It's a performance of hate. It's not simply a hate violence. It's a performance, just as in Jim Crow's America, there was a performance of hate through lynching. Except that we replaced the gathering of crowds to watch with the video camera. And it's become now, it's something we've not seen except in these last 10, 11 years. And that's why I felt that, again, learning from the example of Gandhi at partition, that you cannot fight hate with hate, you only deepen hate. Instead, we go to the home, we resolve to go to the home of every person we kill in lynching. Go not as even as a human rights worker. Just go like you would go to your, if this had happened to your friend or to your family, to say you're not alone, we share your pain. We seek forgiveness for what has happened to you. We pledge to be with you as you pick up the broken pieces of your life and fight for justice, and we pledge to tell your story. And this is now, the Karwan Mohammed or the Caravan of Love is now becoming central to my life, because it is the only way I can find to battle the hate that is, the triumph of the ideology of hate, the poison that is spread to more and more parts of our society. But when I look and travel around the world, I see this poison spreading around the world. And therefore, I come back to where I started. I feel mankind is in the midst of a profound civilizational crisis. And we stand at a crossroads, every one of us, in every country in the world. Do we go to a path which is based on tolerance is a word I don't like very much. Tolerance, I'm just putting up with you. No, more than tolerance. Celebrating. It's so interesting. How do we do this? What kind of food we eat? What kind of food do we eat? Let's welcoming diversity, welcoming difference. And to the other side is being hateful and resentful. And violently so. And I think we're being invited to choose between a path of love and equality or a path of hate and resentment. And the 100 years of the celebration of the RSS on the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi is an opportunity for us to be mindful of the choices that especially the young people in this room must make. What kind of country we want to grow old in, what kind of world we want to grow old in, what kind of country we want to leave for your children. You will have to choose. Thank you.
How many people are there? So can we hear the question from Zoom?
It would be best if people on Zoom have a question, if you raise your hand on the Zoom call, and then we can see.
What did you come here? Oh, they don't have to.
That would be good.
Okay.
That's good. So any questions? We've had this very profound, thought-provoking and heartfelt presentation. And I think we don't have a lot of time for question and answers because we also want to move to the reception and forward. But we do have time for discussions. Yeah.
We could pick up a set of questions.
Yeah, let's pick up a set of questions, also introduce yourselves.
Right.
Yeah. Sure.
My name is Saleha. I'm from Pakistan. I'm a third semester Mander student. My question, I guess it's just, I'm not very familiar with the current political climate in India, what internally is brewing. So I just wanted to ask, like, given all the rise that RSS has, where do you see it going? Like, do you think it will grow bigger, or at some point will it disseminate and just things will look better?
Any other questions? Yes, Kevin.
Thank you so much for your talk. I mean, you talked a lot about like the starting of the RSS and how it's now growing stronger inside of India. I was just wondering if you have some knowledge on outside support to the RSS of like NRIs, maybe even in Germany. I know there is some, I don't know if you also call it branch then, but some kind of organizational base just 1-2 hours away from here in Stuttgart, for example, how they are supporting also the growth of the RSS within India.
Yes, Anushka.
So, I mean, my name is Anushka. I am in my third semester Modi-led program. I'm also studying political science as my major. I just wanted to ask you a question. I mean, over the last 10-15 years now, we've been seeing a lot of issues in India. And most of these issues are, again, something that we've known since independence, Hindus versus Muslims, right? Knowing all of this, is there still some hope where we can call India a secular democratic republic?
Yes, are there any questions from the audience in the chat room? Yeah. Okay, one more question there.
Thank you very much for this talk. I wanted to ask what you think.
Yourself, please.
Sorry, I'm Lily. I'm a student here, just started. Anthropology. What do you think the best way to sort of stop or slow down this growing movement of hate you talked about the colonialism? I don't know what that is, but it sounds interesting.
Yes.
Again, related to moving forward. Previously, we have seen division. If you talk about the freedom movement, there will be a lot of freedom fighters who will try to encourage the masses using relations to like Indian culture, Indian icons. So they would have a fighting spirit in battling the British supremacy. Obviously now it's different with RSS. It's more negative. This sort of revisionist politics entirely different. So can we even looking forward imagine an India without this revisionist politics into play, because how integrated religion is in the landscape of Indian politics, in its functionings, in its existence itself of hierarchies, and your social life basically being incorporated with how, like, what status you're born as, even today. So,
My name is Oyon, and I have a question about, as a member of civil society yourself, and this question is from a very strategic standpoint. What can grassroots civil society organizers in the opposition to RSS actually learn from their methods and their modes of operation? Because they seem to be, like you said, the largest non-organized, non-formal right-wing organization. So, yeah.
Are there any questions from the?
I don't think so. Sir.
Okay. Anyway, we can wait for you to formulate questions, but you can take this first set of questions. Yeah, keep up in touch.
Thank you. That was a very great set of questions and very comprehensive. Let me take a few, and if I miss out, then you can call me on. About religion, Nandini, you spoke. A lot of friends say it's time we keep religion out of public life, social life. I have a sense that the lesson is actually very different. The problem, I think it from the left, and I include myself in the left, we've tended to be intolerant of religious faith. And any kind of religious faith is seen as like, there's a problem there. And I think that's a huge mistake. Because when we look back at our freedom struggle, and this is something those of you who are familiar with India's freedom struggle, there are two people who, if I identify, who most fought against India's this whole politics of hate and division and so on. And for a country which would respect every faith. One of them is Mahatma Gandhi, the other is Maulana Azad. Both deeply religious. One is the Maulana Gandhi's everyday discourse used to be around religion. But it was a religion where he said Ishwar and Allah, they say. His prayer meetings every evening used to begin with recitation of prayers of every faith. And he died he gave his life for people of the other faith. And they asked him, in fact, one of the things, people asked him, Gandhi, you become very pro-Muslim. And it's something else very often said to me. He said, yes, in India I will be pro-Muslim. After this I will go to Pakistan. If he had not been killed, that is, he was planning to go in a week, 10 days. And in Pakistan I will be pro-Hindu. And so on. So he was deeply religious, very deeply committed, and so was Maulana Azad. Maulana Azad was at one of his speeches is quite. He said that if Angel Gabriel came on top of Qutub Minar at that time, was this minaret which was very high. So he imagines Gabriel coming on top of Qutub Minar and saying, in 24 hours you can get either of these two things, but you have to give up the other. Either you get freedom, or you get Hindu Muslim unity. What will you choose? And he said, I would reply to him, I would choose Hindu Muslim unity. Because if freedom comes late, the Indian people will suffer. If Hindu Muslim unity takes down, all of humankind will suffer, because if there's any people who can show Christianity came to us in 56 AD, long before even it came to the Vatican. Islam came to us while the Prophet was still living, through the traders and so on. It is a place which is welcomed and so on. So the two people who fought for a political state, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life. And Savarkar, who was the founder of the Mahasabha, was a self-professed atheist. And I think there has to be a lesson somewhere. The people who were religious, truly profoundly religious, were willing to give their lives for people of other faiths and identities. The people who were not religious were willing to take lives for establishing a religious state. So I think that we have to be careful to say this is not a problem of religion, but the misuse of religion. I remember I was speaking in Jamia to a group of students, and Mr. Jamia, and now nobody can invite me, but that's another issue in India there. But anyway, I was speaking there, and this very despondent young Muslim man, boy, student, said to me, however much I love this country, whatever I do, I'll always be a man. And my reply to him was, I don't think you're a man. So he said, why? I said, if the fight in India is between Hindus and Muslims, of course you're a man. But I don't think the fight is. The fight is between those who value their own faith or are not pleased to respect all other faiths, and those who misuse religion for hate. I think that is a minority. I think we are all part of this larger community. So I think this idea of respecting faith is something that we have to bring back. In France, secularism would mean not encouraging a young woman walking into this classroom with a hijab. In India, it would be to defend her right to wear. We're both calling it secularism, but it's very different imaginations of what a secular society is, one where we respect each other. And I think, I was just back from Turkey. Kemal Atatürk also was intolerant. I mean, he was intolerant of anyone wearing hijab. In Iran, he is intolerant of anyone not wearing hijab. Both are intolerance. Both need to be, fought against. So that is number one. I think you asked about the outside support. The diaspora is a very powerful source of support. I mean, much of its money, there have been many studies that have established it, people have written books. And there's a paradox actually. In the US, people say if you are white, there's a great chance that you'll be voting Trump. But if you're white with a university degree, the chances go dramatically down. In India, it's the opposite. If you're upper caste Hindu, great chance of you voting. Upper caste Hindu with a university, even greater chance. Like upper caste Hindu university degree in the most privileged institution, very high chance. And gone abroad, then so almost certain. It's a paradox that we have to understand why education and privilege has made us more irrational and hateful. But that is a peculiar part of our reality. And it is this diaspora that on the 75th anniversary of India's freedom in New Jersey, the Indian community decides to have a procession to celebrate. And the celebration is headed by a bulldozer. Sitting in New York, they're celebrating India's freedom with the bulldozer because bulldozers are breaking down Muslim homes. That was one case in which the Indian Muslim community sadly had to protest and they had to apologize. But it is this imagination from a distance. I mean, you got where you are because this country protects minority rights. But in your own country of origin, you don't want them to protect minority rights. We are very comfortable even with this paradox. So yes, there's huge support, and that's why Mr. Modi spent a lot of his time as a pracharak actually abroad. He used to mobilize NRI community, non-resident Indian communities, and he built a large base in the years that he was a pracharak. What in the grassroots can we learn? I asked. Dedication. quite frankly, I feel that those of us here and elsewhere in the world who believe in goodness and kindness and equality, what have we done about it? How much of our lives do we dedicate to it? The dedication of the others, and remember they were out of power for 50, 70 years. They kept working. And I'll give you a small example if you have time, and just from my period as a district officer. It was about massive time we were having the movement, the riots were happening everywhere. I was sort of really fighting to ensure that we were fair. So it's a long story. But one particular incident was the RSS that I wanted to share. So we used to, night and day, the discipline, the police head and I used to, we hardly slept for about 19 days. We used to just go around the city, trying to ensure everything. Everywhere was peaceful, but one place, at around 12:01 or something, there was a huge uproar. Look, the Muslims are throwing stones from the mosque. They won't learn, and my police colleagues said that there'll be riots again. I mean, there's so much anger. We went there, we used to go there. The mosque was really far away and winding routes, and it was completely irrational. I would say, yeah, if the Muslims are so adept, then let's send them to the Olympic Games or something, they can throw stones. But people would still, how do we? But I had this very intelligent police colleague. So one day, among all the stones, there was a broken cup. Without hesitation, picked up the cup, walked into a house, walked on to the first floor, 5 other cups, fifth cup. Went on to the second floor, and what did we find? A huge box like this full of stones. Now there's this old man, dedicated RSS colleague. Every night around midnight, when everyone had gone to sleep, he would go and start throwing stones into people's windows. People would wake up and say, look at these Muslims, they're not running, etc. I mean, it was also dedicated. Nobody will ever give him recognition. He'll not be recognized for what he's done. He'll be given no awards, etc. But he believed in whatever he did, he believed in, he did. And what are we doing? And I say this even now under threat. In the battle that I'm fighting, I have the government charging me with every time. I feel pretty alone. I have many nice, good progressive friends, some of whom you would know, etc. Who say, okay, we'll fight about other things. We'll fight governance, we'll fight something else. They won't mention this. And I tell them it's like living in Nazi Germany and saying, I'm sure there were many wrong things that were happening in Nazi Germany. So I'm talking about all of those, but not about the Jews. How will history guide us? So I have a feeling that we have not displayed both the commitment and the courage of convictions that this land has. And radical, what I call radical love, actually, like the RSS described Gandhi as as weak and feminine for his pursuit of love and non-violence. And for those of us who are trying to walk on that path, I say feminine. If I'm like a woman, like great compliment, thank you. But it's not. I mean, there's no courage in a group, in a mob that gathers and stones an unarmed man. The courage is in the one who can leap in the middle and say, "I won't let you do this." So let's redefine courage. I think kindness in times of hate is a sign of courage. So we have to display far more moral courage and conviction. I don't think we have done nearly enough, especially educated people. And
Can I let somebody ask the last question and you respond?
the one last thing, and the most important question was where do we move from here, and so I just wanted to say I still have hope. And hope to some degree. I mean, there was this young man, a Muslim man, who was put into prison in the protest against the Civil War. And he came out after some months, and I was really impressed because time we had no mask. He just came out and he had written no CA, no, and he wrote his protest on his mask and came out knowing the, and he was a Muslim boy, working class, the kind of courage he displayed. So I had a long conversation with him later, and I asked him, do you still feel hopeful after all of this? And he replied, Mayusi kufr, which literally means that despair is like blasphemy. You have to hope, because only when you hope will you fight. And therefore, my hope is, I think will change is how working class India respond. And over again, I find when the terror attack happened in Pahalgam in Kashmir, and tens of thousands of tourists were trapped in great fear. Every Kashmiri home opened their doors, took them in, took care of them like their own family. The highway, as people were trying to leave, the highway was lined with Kashmiri people who were giving people food, giving them water. This is the battle. I mean, this is the battle. How do you fight hate with love? I mean, this is the display. We had the great Sangam, the confluence of the Kumbh Mela, and there was a huge stampede. Mosques opened up to take care of people. It is these actions that still reassure me that ordinary working class Indians are still fighting this battle of hate with the way they live their lives. And there's still enough of them. Luckily, we are still in a minority as educated, privileged Indians. However hard we try, we're not being able to take down our country.
Last question, Hussain.
Thank you so much, Hashim, for the presentation. I'm Hussain, lecturer at the Department of Political Science. Hashim, I have a question. Many argue that the secular parties and secular forces fail. Many argue that secular parties and secular forces fail to create sustained grassroots networks comparable to RSS. Do you think the absence of long-term cadre-based organization among several forces has been decisive? Again, similarly, we have a view that the Congress' historical compromises with some Hindutva in the 1980s, 1990s contributed to legitimizing the Arab worldview. And how did the professionalization and elitism of the secular politics alienate the lower and middle classes, create the vacuum that the RSS actually could fill? So this is actually asking the question from other side.
Great questions. Because I don't have time, I could talk for about half an hour about this. The Congress, the center left in my own country, but if you look at every country, they have just lost the moral conviction and courage. If you listen carefully to Kamala Harris, she wasn't actually saying something very different either about Gaza or about migration than Trump. She just was more personal. But she wasn't radically, she didn't have the courage to say, I'll stand with the Palestinian people, or why should migrants not be allowed? I mean, she didn't have the courage to say that. Likewise, in India, the Congress is displaying a continued lack of nerve. Rahul Gandhi is fighting back, but he says everything else, and I've told him this on his face. I say that you're not willing to use the capital M word, which is Muslim. He'll talk about everything else happening, but he won't talk about what that. He won't speak out when there's a lynching. He won't be there. He goes and helps, visits people who are suffering in different ways. He won't meet the Muslim. It's a very conscious kind of silence, and it is this that and soft Hindutva is for those who is where you're pretending to be that your identity is Hindu. And so there's a member of parliament, very great guy, who speaks out. So we were both on a bank. He said, I don't understand, what is this soft Hindutva? Is there a soft Satan and a hard Satan? Satan is Satan only. So it's exactly that. And I just wanted to applaud him. He also said something else very beautiful. He said, Muslims are not the footnote of the India story. They are co-authors of the India story. Have the courage to stand up. And you talk about cadres. In Gandhi's time, when there were riots, people would go and do what we are trying to do. And in fact, when he went to Bihar, where 7,000 Muslims had been killed, he actually said, has any congressman been killed? Why aren't they? Why didn't they go and try to stop? So there was a sense that this was your job. That is the cadre I'm looking for. But when, say, the Gujarat massacre, I looked around, I could not find a single person in the relief camps wearing khadi and of a Congress identity. In the lynchings, I had gone to 150 odd families probably who lost loved ones to lynching in this caravan. I have never found a single instance of people from the political establishment going and standing in solidarity with them. Whereas what was Gandhiji doing? I mean, Peter was being fought for and he was spending all his time trying to reach out to them. So I think a cadre which is based on the ideas of love and respect for every faith, we just haven't built it because we don't believe enough, we don't care enough. The proponents of faith seem to have much greater conviction than we have displayed. So we are culpable. I wrote a book called Partitions of the Heart. I said there's one partition on our land, and look at how much suffering for their generations it has engendered. We're seeing a million partitions of the heart. What are you doing about it? Each of the South Asians here, you tell me about the WhatsApp groups of your family, of your friends, of people who study, and all the hate that happened there. Why don't you make a start there? Why don't you make a start, most of all, with your own parents? This is where we begin to learn to read in these times. And how do you fight the hate of your parents while still loving them? Find a way.
So I think we've had, as I said, both rational, heartfelt, and graphic understanding of probably the major predicament of our times. And I think if there is one conclusion we go back home with, it is not that the RSS has been very successful.
Yeah.
It is not that Hitler was very successful. It is not that the cadres of Donald Trump are very successful, but that people who profess to uphold liberal values have been rather more unsuccessful. So when Hitler was becoming popular in the 1920s, he did not have more than 3% of the German vote. But what he succeeded in doing was to penetrate the phalanx of Germany far more effectively than the traditional political parties did. And in the case of India, we find that not only was the Babri Masjid opened by a Prime Minister of India who belonged to the Congress party, only later to be destroyed by the BJP. The RSS has succeeded because organizations like the Congress Seva Dal have declined. Even recently, when Rahul Gandhi undertook a yatra, which is now quite popularly known, he seems to have made an impact. And in many states, for example, in Karnataka, where the Congress won, it did make an impact. We know that a country like Bangladesh, which became free on the basis of Bengali identity, is today moving in the direction of Jamaat, spearheaded by a man who is supposed to be the author of microcredit in the world today. So I think this kind of hidden pragmatism of the liberals and the left, where, as Dr. Mander pointed out, you miss the dedication and the commitment to a certain idea. And this is why one of the things that we actually teach in our classes and where we differ from Marx is the importance of ideas. And some of these ideas don't necessarily have a material basis. They just get impregnated. And how they get impregnated, how they convince people, and how they motivate them to do good and bad. Again, going to a Hegelian world is really the predicament of our values. And I think we should thank Dr. Mander for pointing us in that direction so that not only should we think about India, but we can think. I just wrote a piece which was shared on India, which was shared with the German Foundation. And they said that, look, we don't know anything about India, but all the things that you're saying seem to tell us a lot about Germany. So this is a universal problem. And we really thank Dr. Mander for pointing this rather in a graphic and unrepentant way in the right direction. Thank you very much.